Good.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to our Human Performance webinars. I am your host, James Grigson, and today I'm very excited for this one. Very juicy webinar. We have the North Melbourne Football Club joining us here. We have Matthew Turnbull, the head of high performance, joining us to walk through an implementation of Smarterbase, or an implementation of an athlete management system at the North Melbourne Football Club, specifically around training load and player availability. Matt, thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it, mate.
Thanks, James. Thanks, guys. No, it's good to be here, and thanks for having me. But look, I know the purpose of today is to chat about the importance of an integrated system and specifically Smarterbase, and provide some examples at the end of how that pertains to load management and availability. But I thought to start with, it'd be helpful to share and provide some background to how we got here and why. And in short, you know, we've, as a club, are entering a new phase. We're entering a rebuild, and you know, with that comes a young new playing list, and also a new set of coaches that bring with them new philosophies of their own. And so we found ourselves at a point where we need to build that playing list from an emerging status to one that's established over a couple of years. And so that is, we basically need to get these guys to a point of good training and game load exposure over a period of time that sets them well for the future. And we've got to get them there without being injured as well. So what we did is, in the off season, we set out to build a new strategy, you know, one that incorporates all those things that we felt important to get there. And while there's no one model that fits all, we felt that our strategy needed to include two key components, or key objectives. One being physical capacity and readiness to perform, and the other one being availability, which is player health. And then all the KPIs and workflows that sat underneath those objectives, and the individual responsibilities that we aligned to it. And then what we decided, well, it's a good strategy, but how we need to get there, there's a lot of moving parts, and we need a good system in place that's going to help connect all those parts together. And that's when we looked into Smarterbase. I think the key important thing of the setup of Smarterbase was to get those workflows in place first, because what we found, certainly with the help of Jack, is that we've been able to build things fairly quickly, because we had the workflows in place to start off with.
And yes, it's rightful that you mentioned Jack. I forgot at the top of the call to introduce Jack Halley here, our Smarterbase consultant, returning to these webinars. Jack worked very closely with North Melbourne in the implementation. So Matt, you guys came on board probably about four or 5 months ago, just heading into the off season that just was for the AFL. You'd mentioned probably the key themes for today, or the key theme being an integrated human performance model, something whereby we have communication across the departments that exist inside of the human performance framework of a football club, that being medical, nutrition in some cases, load management, and then even across into the coaching staff as well, and making sure that they're aware, and more importantly, probably most importantly for some people, to the players, as we'll see today. So today we're going to go from a macro view down to a micro view. We're going to start from a season plan and go through some of the ways in which North have chosen to implement, and some features that North have chosen to implement for their season planning. We'll go through some examples of session planning inside of the Smarterbase framework. We'll also look at GPS reporting, and then GPS reporting back to the players as well, all linking back to the key theme of an integrated HP philosophy, which Matt touched on at the beginning of the session. So without further ado, we'll jump to a screen share and we'll look at the session plan overall. Jack's just going to share that on his screen here. So Matt, I just want to get you to talk through the philosophy here and what you guys are trying to achieve with the overall season plan, that is, I should say, and what this view here means to you and to the rest of the club.
Sure. Look. Everything starts with a plan, and we obviously, as with any club, would periodize our pre-season, so off-season, pre-season, and season into blocks. The purpose of the season plan is that everyone in our team has access to where we are within our periodization plan, and where we're going to be. Now, this part of our Smarter Base dashboard is still being finalized and built, so we're sort of building it as we go. But the purpose of it is to make sure that everyone's very clear about where we are and where we want to be with respect to our periodization plan.
So in terms of the key stakeholders here for you, Matt, is this really just from the top a high performance framework, or is this something that's consulted with the coaches? How does this sit?
Yeah, look, it's both high performance team and the coaches, James. It's one that's not limited to the coaches too, because our general manager has also asked to have access to this as well. But it's a really nice, quick reference point where it saves time. You know, we don't, rather than heading downstairs to talk about what phase we're in or where we're going to be, what's the main session day next week. You know, when's game -1 in 3 weeks' time. It means that anyone in our wider coaching and performance team can literally just open the dashboard and have access to it straight away.
And just for some of our current customers, and Jack, you might be able to touch on this as well. Matt, in your view, is this more just a planning document or a planning sheet for the season ahead, or are you also planning on putting in some actuals in terms of, when I say actuals, I mean, you know, session results, session outcomes, or planned session outcomes with respect to load and load management into this viewpoint, or is that somewhere else for you?
Look, down the track, James, that's the plan. You know, we're currently building we built our actual versus planned load dashboards already, and that's been on the back of our GPS ones as well. But the idea is that as time goes on, all this data then gets fed into the one sheet as a summary. So we get to look back and see how far we've come. I think in future, though, what it means is it sets a nice little visual platform for planning for the next season. It gives us a nice way of looking back and going, well, look, this is a really nice snapshot of how we went this year. How can we look into next season?
Yeah, that's great. And I think going down now from a season plan into an actual session plan, it's one thing that we've seen North do really well, and they've tied in some really nice features of the system to enhance what we're about to see. So what we're about to go to isn't North Melbourne's session plan itself. This is our Smarter Base demonstration environment. But Matt, you know, there are some similarities for what we're seeing here and what you have. Talk to me about the importance of a session plan, especially with respect to, one, you know, collaboration with the coaches, two, and how that helps then the high performance team in the planning of load and then just managing load in general.
Yeah, sure. Look, I can go back a step too. We talked about our overarching philosophy of getting the balance right between performance and health, but our primary workflow that flows from that is our primary prevention workflow, and that comes into what falls into that is load management. So the important thing, I think, with any team trying to manage load well is to get their actual versus planned loads right. But then we tend to know that fairly well in our high performance team, but getting the coaches to work in with that is another challenge. And so what the session planner has helped us to do is get that part of the workflow really sound. So in talking you through what it involves is One, a set of drills that we keep in a drill library. And once Catapult data has been downloaded and we can have a name or a code to that drill, it gets saved. So it means that we can go onto the training planner and simply enter the drill in from the drill library. And straight away, that gives you a representation of key metrics from the last time we did that drill. And so as we enter more drills into the library, those key metrics add up. And what we have is if we've already set a planned load for that session, so it has then adds a bit of a red light system to whether or not we're going over or under that planned load to help guide the prescription of that session. But not only that, we've also then add our conditioning blocks to that, and as a result, we're able to balance out our drills versus conditioning load for that session ahead of the session.
And Matt, talk to me about the actual process of the session plan. So is this something that's, where the high performance team is sitting down with the coaching team, or does the high performance team, separate to the coaching team, prescribe the load and hand over the software for the coaches to navigate? How does it work?
Yeah, look, sorry, I didn't quite get to that. We set out for it to involve the coaches a little bit more. But what we've ended up with is still a very good collaboration in that we've got a conduit from the coaching team. So our assistant coach is the one responsible for entering these drills in to the library. So our process, we've got a workflow in place that starts with us entering our planned loads into Smarterbase. The coaches or the conduit coach then having access to training planner and those planned loads. He then enters in the loads, the drills. But what the second part of our workflow now is that we actually then go in and have a look at what he's entered. And we probably sometimes find that we're a little bit over the planned load, and then usually it's a circle back to discuss drill times and that type of thing in order to to best meet in the middle and stay within our planned load parameters. But I guess the real nice thing about this is it encourages good communication between the two parties. And as a result, particularly after 6 weeks of we're into 7th, 8th week of the preseason of a new coaching cohort, you form really good relationships from it. So it's been a nice avenue to create a good teamwork culture.
And then sort of flowing on from here, once the session has been planned and the session takes place, we now obviously are looking at the actuals. So Jack, if you want to jump back to one of the North Melbourne dashboards here, we have here a plan versus actual view of the session. And Matt, this is an important thing not only for you but any sport that's any sport that's involving any sort of load, really, to understand where you want to go, where you've come from, and some movements and analysis around that. Talk me through the plan versus actual here for those that are watching, and what some of the key metrics are for here, and what some of the things that you look for.
Yeah, sure. So it's what's really nice about the planned load is everyone in our team, including coaches, now have access to it. And I think the example you brought up here is a rehab player. Someone who got injured. But we're still working on what this visualization is going to look like finally. But what you see here is both a breakdown of weekly load at the top of the screen. We've just picked a few key metrics as a visual to begin with, and so one is total distance, and it breaks down distance of running. We've got our sprinting meters in there. We've got individualized zones that we apply to our athletes. So this is individualized to that specific athlete. as well as some other metrics. But the purpose of it is really for anyone in our team to be able to have a quick snapshot and look at what both the players' actual loads have been, but then also for our planned loads for that particular individual to be entered in advance. What it gives you is a shape of the curve representation for that particular individual. This probably isn't the best example because the curve's sort of all over the place there, but it just gives you a nice little representation of what that shape is for that person. And then right at the bottom of that, if you scroll all the way down, you can actually break up the session content for that person as well, which goes into a bit more depth per metric that you're looking at.
And for those that are watching, Matt, this is just running loads. Is there, sorry, go on.
Predominantly, James, yeah, predominantly. Look, total distance is not just running load. I think every team breaks it up a little bit differently, but our running load is anything from anything above 7 kilometers an hour. But it doesn't only, it's predominantly running load, but not restricted to it.
Understood. And as you said, the visual cue there of sort of the curve that you referred to, obviously, I guess with more than just the HP staff coming into this dashboard, using sort of visuals and simple terminology like the curve would be something that would be easy to then be able to educate other stakeholders like coaches and GMs and things like that. Am I right in assuming that you're using that same terminology inside of the club and using that to then teach coaches and teach GMs what these trends mean?
Yeah, we are. And look, I mean, the coaches that have been around for a long time know the terminology well. But more than them, James, it's the players too. It means you can very quickly bring up a chart or a graph and show it to them. They quickly get quite engaged, and it's just more information for them to better understand and plan ahead. And I think it also gives them these are competitive guys, so by being able to visualize and have a look at what they've achieved, it gets them excited at trying to attack and achieve the next step.
Most certainly, and we're going to get to an athlete-facing dashboard in just a second. For those that are watching that are a part of the Smarterbase family, Jack, this dashboard here is combining both historical data and future and planned data. The time series charts at the top are relatively, there's a lot of different series happening here. Are you able to just talk through, just from a dashboard build perspective, quickly what you've been able to achieve here?
Yeah, absolutely. So to begin with, the per week graph that we're looking at here at the top, that's actually pulling in 3 separate data sources. So it's not in fact a time series chart, it's actually a categorical chart. So the labels that we have along the bottom here on our x-axis, they're concatenated fields from our season planner event form. So similar to what we were seeing in the season plan periodization widget that we looked at in the first dashboard. All of that information along this x-axis is fed from those season plan records, and they're individualized for each athlete. So if one athlete is on a particular season plan where they might be coming out of a rehab period, or they may have gotten injured at some point, those week categories might be slightly different to that of an athlete from the healthy cohort. So that's consistent across, those categories are consistent across our Catapult GPS event form, where the actual is coming from, and also our plan load event form, where we can see these grayed out series. That's our future data. So as you alluded to, James, we've got both historic and future data. So that display is just through some clever use of limiting our data sources in the dashboard builder itself, and only including all history or all future records for each respective event form. And then with the loads per day, that's just a typical time series chart there. So with the same setup with future and historic data for each of the respective event forms.
And Jens, you've just asked a question that I think Jack might have answered really well with that explanation there for those watching. We just had a question come through. So I think, Jens, if you have any other questions, feel free to pop that through and we'll address that further. But moving on from the planned versus actual, we're going to jump into just a GPS session report here. Matt, I want to understand from you, obviously you sitting at a HP, high performance manager point of view, you wouldn't be in the data as much as maybe, say, your sports scientist would be. But I'm keen to hear from you any takeaways that you have from this particular dashboard, whether it be from how you know your sports science team interact with these data sets, or whether there's an element within inside of this dashboard that you as a HP manager really take to and get out of.
Yeah, so for me, James, it's a little bit more about how I can bridge our sports science team to our coach. This particular dashboard has been built for our coach more than anything, who's very interested in this. And so what we've found is we've added columns to it that that over the last, we're a new coaching and performance team, but over the last few months have added, just based on circumstance and what we felt is important as we've gone along. For us, what is important is that one of our objectives is getting our actual and planned loads to match. It's a nice representation of how we are performing. We don't want to overreach or overshoot, but at the same time we want to get there. So the coach is well versed on what our planned load has been, and with the session planner and action, it's really got them engaged into trying to get those actual best planned loads met. So the key ones we usually look for are total distance, high speed running, sprinting meters, and then our other intensity, high intensity player load metrics on the far side. But what's nice about this dashboard is you can then scroll down and see it all see it all from an individual level. We've obviously color coded based on specific areas we've been trying to focus on. What we can also do with this dashboard is put it on a TV screen after training, and it just means the players have access to it, and they can actually see what they've achieved in session, and compare notes to other players as well.
And for those that are watching, we've obviously left the player column out. So all the rows that you're seeing, this is from an individual session, and each individual row represents an individual player. Obviously, we've kept the names of the players out of this display for privacy purposes. So I'm interested in what you just spoke about there, Matt, how you maybe put this up on a TV screen and have players compare notes. For the players, what do you think that means, and what do you see from them when they are being engaged with this sort of data? Do you see, is it just more of an interest in what you as a HP team are doing? Do they take competition in this and maybe want to try and achieve their zones, more so in the next session? What's the result of having this shared with the players in such a way?
Yeah, probably all those things, James, I reckon. But I think the big one is again, we're trying to, the whole purpose of this is to integrate us all a little bit more. Most clubs and teams will have their own, dashboard and visualizations. The whole key purpose of this was that every one of us have access to it. So what I've probably seen the most is a bit more engagement and interaction with our load management staff and the players. So players actually viewing this. I think we've got another example of a GPS report that goes to the players' phones. But players viewing this and knowing who to go see to ask more questions about it, which is good. So without going into the details, we throw some initiatives at our training, and we use some key language around what we're trying to achieve, and the purpose of this just supports what we've thrown at them from a language point of view and what we've asked them to achieve. So it just gives them another reference to what we did out on the track, and another avenue to ask more questions about what they're seeing.
And look, that's a perfect segue to jump to the athlete-facing dashboard. This here is a dashboard that sits on the player's phone. So here we have an example of that on the screen here. This is a screen recording of such a dashboard within the Smarterbase environment. Athletes are able to come into the mobile application, fill out wellness forms, and so on and so forth. They're also able to review information that has happened, and a key thing that we here at Fusion Sport push is try to have as much on the mobile as we can, especially when we're dealing with athletes that are typically on the mobile a lot. Matt, what you've mentioned that this keeps the athletes engaged. Can you talk me through this a little bit more, and maybe, I guess maybe why some of these, is this just important metrics for you, or is this something that that you've, like, are these metrics that you've specifically chosen to push to your athletes, or is this just sort of an introduction? Like, are you going to build and evolve from this?
Yeah. Look, it's predominantly based on what we're trying to get out of them. Look, for example, we've got a speed focus at the moment. We set some individualized, so we've got individualized zones for sprinting meters for them this year, and so the percentages that they see are based on their individual zone, and so we've got goals that we set for them to hit in session, to both from an injury prevention point of view as well as a performance point of view, but also from an athlete knowing their internal clock, as we call it. So being able to gauge what they're trying to achieve outside, and then get feedback from it. So one specific data points that we want them to be aware of and see, but then two, from other metrics point of view, the typical ones we put in front of them that they're used to. So total distance, high speed running meters is something that that athletes tend to be quite aware of from their previous year's game data, etc. So it's something they're familiar with and can relate to straight away.
We've just had a question come in from Owen McLean at the AIS, and this might be one for Matt or Jack here. The question is, do you visualize group/position averages against the individual athletes?
I don't think we haven't got a visualization platform for that on Smarterbase just yet. I think we've got avenue to do that. Jack, you probably might be able to answer that more. A lot of what our sports scientists have already, we haven't quite got onto Smarterbase just yet, but there's certain, but yeah, I'm sure there's capability for that. Jack?
Yeah, 100% there is. I know a lot of what we've done so far together on the site has been more individualized, probably aside from the session planning work that we've done where we're looking from a squad perspective, but there's nothing stopping us from building out dashboards that have that style of comparison. That's definitely achievable within the system.
And Matt, we have another question from the audience. Jens has asked, what approach are you using for the conditioning drills that you're doing? Is this he's asked, is it MAS? What's your approach for these conditioning drills? Yeah, look, our conditioning team, they have a mix made of, look, mass running components have been spread out through the preseason, but obviously our focus has been around
tying up our training to meet the goals of the coaches and the game plan. But I won't go into the details of the conditioning. It's not overly my area. So, but certainly mass running is a component of our conditioning. What we tend to do is we focus around our planned loads for drill content, and we either add our conditioning in post-session or interspersed in between those drills.
And Matt, before we jump to Q&A, I'd probably want to throw this one to Jack and yourself as well. It was a relatively short period of time to do quite a lot. So this is a lot to achieve, at least from our stance. It's been fantastic to watch the high performance unit of North Melbourne put this together with Jack in such a short period of time. 2 months to lead in towards the beginning of pre-season, and now we're sort of 2 months into pre-season. Talk me through the process, and Jack, feel free to jump in first here, mate. The process of implementing a system such as this. What are some of the key steps that you took from your side in getting all the requirements together and making sure things were as structured as they need to be, because the result here is quite a structured system?
Yeah, I would say to begin with, we had to really identify what were the base level workflows that we needed to get up and running as soon as possible. One of those from a Smarter Base perspective was setting up a few generic sort of season plan, session planning style event forms where there's an entry against every athlete every day to capture what they're doing that day, what day of the week it is, day codes, things like that. A lot of key variables that are going to underpin a lot of the filtering that we do across the site in the dashboards. These fields need to link into various other event forms and workflows to enable a lot of that filtering. So that was really important to identify what those particular fields were early on and make sure that we had them established across all of our event forms and workflows. And I guess some of those key workflows early days were setting up all of our GPS things, all of our load planning. So getting the integration set up with Catapult, organizing the plan load event form. Obviously, there was a lot of work that went into the session plan event form as well. We haven't really touched on the breadth of how much work has gone into that workflow in this discussion yet, but the approach that we took there is slightly different to what we've done in the past with other clients where we've tried to integrate with another connector there. So there was a lot of time and effort that was put into that. They were the key workflows, and then following on from that, once everyone was, I guess, somewhat established in the system and had an understanding of what their responsibilities were in the system, and we could share that responsibility across different users, then we had a really good foundation to build off of, where we could then take requests from different user groups at the club. So if it's a request from the coaches, if it's a request from nutritionists, anthro, or rehab stuff, things like that. So I don't know if you've sort of felt the same way about that journey, Matt.
Yeah, Jack. No, I think you summed it up well. One thing I must say is that it was a lot of work, and one thing I can also add is that had we not have done it in the off season, I think we would have struggled a bit more in season for that reason. But the journey's been really smooth. And, Jack, you worked a lot with Tanya Gallo, our head of sports science. And I think getting our GPS side of things sorted first and our season planner sorted first, I think everything else was able to flow on a bit quicker as a result. Had we had tried to go the other way, it probably it might not have gone as smoothly. So I think that the take home is if you're setting up these Smarter Base into your program, you can do it at any time, but I think it's worth trying to achieve it in the off season. It just meant that when we arrived here at pre-season, we had our workflows pretty much set up and ready to go. And so as a result, it's been quite easy to build them further. And everyone in our performance team has basically used it from day dot.
Yeah, and look, it's a key, whether it's Smarterbase or sort of any database or anything really. Starting small, starting with your key pillars, and building from there. At this point, I really want to open up to the floor that we have. Please, the Zoom functionality at the bottom of your screen or the right hand side of your screen, you can raise hand if you'd like to talk, or you can type in the chat functionality. We'd love to open it up to Q&A. Please pop those questions in. As you're writing those questions or raising your hand, Matt, I've got one more for you about implementing a new system in your environment. Talk to me from culturally. We talked about sort of practically what needed to be done, setting up the key variables, building the foundation from there. But culturally, having to create change in the organization, having the departments sort of collide a little bit more and work together a little bit more. You being sort of at the forefront of that, what, if you can speak maybe out of the system, what were some of the challenges and key things that you had to do to ensure that you had that cross collaboration?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Obviously, especially where you come into an environment where particularly colleagues, other professionals have been in here for a long time, there's a culture that comes with it. But we were quite lucky in that, as we are in a rebuild phase, and we've had the inclusion of a new head coach, young players, it did make it a bit easy. I think it has made it a bit easier for us to, set up a new philosophy and culture within our team, our department. But part of that strategy was to try and get it in front of everyone from the word go, from the very beginning. And as a result, so what I mean by that is that we were quite clear as a performance team what our philosophy strategy was before the players got in for pre-season. So straight away, it meant that we were able to work and behave in a certain way that I think shaped the culture. Smarterbase, of course, was part of that strategy. So players are pretty good in that they really just get given, they see what's in front of them, and yep, this is a new way to do it. We practice it, and then we get on with it. So by having that all set up, really helped. And then, but finally too, we've got a great coaching staff and a great head coach who's really positive on, he's big on growth mindset and has really assisted to elevate our team and our new philosophy too. So we've been very fortunate. It all comes down to working with good people, and we seem to have a really good environment here that's allowed that to happen.
We have a couple of questions that have come through as we were answering that last one from me. First one from Dominic, and it's addressed to all of us. So, hi guys, how would you incorporate gym-based load or session RPEs into the system that we've just seen to monitor cumulative load of off-field and gym-based conditioning sessions? So, Matt, is that something that you guys have considered putting in, or Jack, would you?
Yeah. I hope I can answer that okay for you, Dominic. I'm certainly not the expert in the area, but our load manager and I have discussed it a bit. This probably is this is kind of a good avenue to your last question, James. Changing systems and bringing in Smarterbase from old ones, but we currently only look at GPS loads in our Smarterbase visual, but we want to incorporate our gym loads, and we used a separate program, Visual Coaching Pro, for the gym, and obviously the gym guys use RPE, but also Absolute, and another load variable. But the idea was that we are going to bring Visual Coaching Pro across. Now, Tanya, our load manager, incorporates gym loads into our overall load monitoring. And that's what we've got separate to Smarterbase at the moment, but certainly we hope to include that on as we go.
And I believe David there, to acknowledge David and Lockie, your question, very, very similar to the one that Dominic just asked around incorporating gym and strength sessions into load consideration. So look, Jack, I'll get you to talk, mate, around maybe some other examples of where customers have brought in both gym-based load and also running load into the one place.
Yeah, I guess there's multiple different ways to look at that data within Smarterbase, depending upon how you as a practitioner choose to monitor it. So if it is a matter of combining it together, there's plenty of ways where we could make use of a stacked bar chart similar to what we saw with the Plan B actual dashboard, where you can put your running loads on top of a S&C load underneath. If you want to plot those out separately, if you want to have separate TSBs or ACWRs for those, we can do that too. Obviously look at the acute and chronic loads for each of those, or as a cumulative. So maybe this will help to a degree, David and Lockie. Quite often when we work with clients, we'll consult with them, we'll try and get an understanding about what they want, how they typically interpret that data. They might already have visual ideas about how they want it to be presented in Smarterbase. We'll take, like what I've done a lot with Matt over the last 4 or 5 months, is if he has existing examples of how he's chosen to look at data in other systems that they've used previously, he might send a screenshot of that through to me. I might see if I can replicate that as best as possible within the Smarterbase environment, as well as showing some separate ways of, perhaps this is a widget that he hasn't had access to in a different system that we do have in Smarterbase, or leaning on the experience that I have working with other clients within this role to try and bring some fresh ideas. So they're just a couple of common ones that I've seen with other clients, but it's often a little bit of a collaboration between myself and the client to work out what is best to use.
We've got another question coming from Owen, and this will be directed for you, Matt. How did you go about educating your different users on using the system? Did you have much resistance?
It's a good question, Owen. If I had to break up our team, and obviously we've got a medical side as well, so we call it injury record. That team seemed to have caught on to it very, very well. I think it's just part of the daily function of theirs to enter medical records. The new aspect of it was our OSIX coding and epidemiological data. That was probably the one thing that took a bit of time to get onto, and we're still getting that right. But I felt the medical aspect of it was quite good. With the coaching, their part of Smarterbase is really just a visualization platform. So Jack was really good at suggesting that we limit what they could have access to maybe a couple of things to begin with might help with their engagement, and it has. So for example, we've limited them to, I think, 3 dashboards, one being GPS reports post-session so they can have a look at it. We've also got wellness, so they can access the player's wellness data straight away from and our flagging system attached to it. And then they can access their training planner, the end result of it. They've got right access to Training Planner too, which means they're involved at creating the training plan via the drill library. But that's about it. And I think we've added one other thing from a coaching point of view to it, which is separate to this. But so that's been really good. But I think approaching it from a less is more starting point has been really good. The coaches aren't too great with the computer. And then the sports science team has been great. That's I mean, out of everyone, they've been able to do the most with it and jump onto it very quickly. Where we haven't quite got across it yet is the strength and conditioning. And as I said before, they've used Visual Coaching Pro, and because this was a new system to us, we needed to only start with a few areas first. And so of course the strength and conditioning team have access and visuals to our GPS data. We also have another thing called a game status report and a training status report, which is pulled from the medical notes. They've got access to that. So they've got access to it, but aren't quite using it from a strength and conditioning point of view just yet. So for the most, I've been really impressed with how many, how much engagement we've had in such a short time. But what's more exciting is that, you know, it's only been 4 months. And so in the next 3 to 4 months, we hope that we've got all our performance and coaching team involved.
And Matt, you're a pretty humble man, so I'll throw some compliments your way. Watching from a bird's eye perspective, you and Jack, and I think this will assist with Owen's question as well, and to echo what you said, Matt, it was a case of, you know, having small, quick wins, but you touched on having only limited access for certain roles. So when rolling out a new system, everyone's experienced the whole sort of overwhelming feeling of, I don't know what that button does, or I don't know what this thing does. Jack and yourself, Matt, have done a really good job of siloing off the needs of different departments within your high performance organization, understanding what those needs are very well and giving them access to that and only that, which has aided in the quick uptake and education of the platform. So you're right, mate. Like I said, very modest man, so I had to throw in a compliment there. For everyone, that seems to be all the questions that we have seen come through. Thank you for joining. Thank you for commenting. You will receive an automatic recording of this webinar once we put that live. So please look out for that. Please feel free to share that with anyone else in your organization. And we'll have more human performance webinars in months to come. For Matt, Jack, I'm James. Thank you very much for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.